The desert had gone quiet by the time Rowan Calden reached the edge of the burnt homestead. Smoke hung low, a bitter scent of char and loss curling into the deep violet sky. His horse shifted beneath him, uneasy. Beyond the brittle fence posts and collapsed walls, a shape moved, small, uncertain, alive. Rowan reined in, the leather creaking in his palm. He thought it was a ghost at first, the kind the plains sometimes conjured to remind a man of his sins. But then it spoke. "Don't leave me here," the voice rasped, soft as a dying wind. "I have no one left." She sat among the ashes, hair tangled with soot, wrapped in the remains of what had once been a blanket, its beadwork glinting faintly like a constellation fallen to earth. Her face was streaked with smoke, eyes wide yet steady. He'd seen grief before, but not like this. This was something that breathed. For a moment, he wanted to turn his horse and keep riding west. He had no business with the living anymore. Yet he stayed, held by something he didn't understand. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice came out rough, a man unused to using it. She shook her head. "Just left behind." The words lingered between them, sharp and strange. He slid down from the saddle, boots crunching over burnt timber. The earth was still warm beneath his soles. "You shouldn't be here alone." "There's nowhere else left," she murmured. Rowan glanced at the horizon, a long stretch of emptiness painted gold by the setting sun. He'd been alone long enough to know what that kind of silence did to a soul. He offered his hand. She didn't take it. For a breath, neither moved. Then, with the slow dignity of someone who'd buried too much pride to have any left, she rose and followed him toward the horse. They rode into the desert as night unfurled overhead. The moon rose pale and indifferent, the stars watching without judgment. She said her name was Elara Greyhawk, her voice low and melodic, the kind that carried stories even when it carried no hope. Rowan told her nothing about himself. His life was a tangle best left unspoken, a duel gone wrong, a friend dead, his name whispered in too many towns with too much pity. Silence, he'd found, was easier than truth. They rode for hours, the only sounds the rhythmic creak of saddle leather and the distant cry of coyotes. When she began to sway with exhaustion, he stopped beside a dry creek bed. "We'll rest here," he said. She slid down without a word, clutching her blanket close. In the faint moonlight, Rowan saw her fingers tracing the bead patterns like a prayer. "It belonged to my mother," she whispered. She said each bead held a memory. "I suppose they're all gone now." He crouched beside the fire he'd built, struck a match, and watched the flame catch. "Maybe not gone," he said quietly. "Just carried different now." She looked at him, curiosity flickering through the exhaustion. "You talk like someone who's lost, too." Rowan gave a tired half-smile. "Ain't we all?" The firelight trembled between them, throwing soft shadows across her face. The silence that followed wasn't empty this time. It was the kind that made a man aware of his own breathing, the space between his heartbeats. He wondered how long it had been since he'd shared that kind of quiet with anyone. When dawn came, it painted the world in muted gold. They rode again, slower this time. Elara's eyes roamed the landscape as though searching for ghosts. "Do you believe the earth remembers?" she asked suddenly. "Remembers what?" "The ones who die on it." Rowan considered this. "If it does, it don't say much about it." She smiled faintly. "Maybe it speaks in storms." He thought about that long after she'd fallen silent. The desert wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of rain. A hawk circled above them, free, unburdened, everything he wasn't. By midday, they came upon the remains of an old chapel half buried in sand. Its roof sagged, but the walls still stood stubborn against time. "We can rest there," Rowan said. Inside, light filtered through a cracked window, dust drifting like old souls. Elara spread her mother's blanket near the altar, her movements gentle, reverent. She knelt and began to hum a tune so low he barely caught it. It wasn't a prayer he knew, but it carried a weight that stilled him. "You pray for the dead?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. Her eyes opened, dark and endless. "For the living. The dead don't need us anymore." He turned away, pretending to check his rifle. Her words hit something buried deep, the memory of a man's face just before the gun went off, the silence that followed, the taste of guilt that had never left his mouth. When he looked back, she was watching him. Not with judgment, with something quieter, something like understanding. It made him uneasy. Outside, a vulture circled. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. They stayed through the night. She slept curled in her blanket, and he kept watch by the door, hand near his gun though no danger stirred. The storm moved closer, its flashes briefly illuminating her face. He noticed how peace seemed to settle there despite everything, a peace he'd never managed to find for himself. When morning came, the sky was heavy with gray. They saddled up again, silent. A few miles out, two riders appeared on the horizon. Rowan's gut tightened. Trouble had a way of finding the lost. As the riders drew closer, he saw the kind of men they were, hungry, reckless, hands too close to their belts. One of them grinned, teeth yellow as old ivory. "Well now, what have we here?" "Man in a squaw, wandering too far from home." Rowan's hand brushed his holster. "Ain't looking for trouble," he said. "Don't matter none," the man sneered. His gaze slid to Alara. "That blanket she's got, Apache make, ain't it? Worth something?" Rowan stepped forward, voice low. "Leave it." "But greed's a language men like that always speak fluently." The second one dismounted, reaching for the blanket draped over Alara's shoulder. She flinched back. "Don't," she whispered. The man laughed. "Didn't ask you, girl." The sound of the gunshot came almost before Rowan realized he'd fired. The man fell, a red bloom spreading across the dust. The other turned and fled without a word. For a long moment, there was only silence. The echo of the shot seemed to linger in the air, heavy as guilt. Alara stared at him, not in fear, but in sorrow. "You killed too easy," she said softly. "It's all I know." She stepped past him, knelt beside the fallen man, and pulled her blanket from her shoulders. He started to protest, but she shook her head. "He was cruel," she said. "But he was still someone's son." She covered the body, pressing her palm against the earth. "Let the dust take him gentle." Rowan felt shame burn through him, not for what he'd done, but for what she was teaching him simply by existing. The desert had shown him many kinds of strength, but never this, the grace to mourn even your enemies. When she rose, her eyes met his. "You can't keep living by the gun," she said. "I don't know another way." "Then learn." The simplicity of it struck him harder than the storm brewing overhead. He wanted to tell her it wasn't that easy, that men like him didn't get to start over. But she was already walking ahead, toward the horizon where light was breaking through cloud. He followed, slow at first, then with growing certainty. The desert wind carried their silence like a vow. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure where he was going, and for the first time, that felt like hope. Behind them, the chapel's roof finally gave way with a distant sigh, the dust rising into morning light. Ahead, the land stretched open, wide and waiting. Rowan glanced at Alara, her figure small yet unbroken against the vastness, and felt something shift quietly inside him. Maybe the earth did remember. Maybe it was remembering them now. He thought of turning back once, of the road he'd meant to take, of the solitude he'd once mistaken for peace. But when Alara looked over her shoulder, the faintest question in her eyes, he nudged his horse forward and fell into step beside her. Neither spoke. The wind did enough talking for both. Yet somewhere in that wordless space, a fragile thread began to weave itself between them. Not love, not yet, but something that might someday become it. The sun climbed higher, the ashes of the past fading behind them, the horizon wide with promise. The desert had taken much, but maybe it was giving something back. And though Rowan did not say it aloud, he knew it deep in his bones, he would not leave her here. Not this time.